Hey Fit Pros, it's your host Tyler Valencia here. Before we get to this episode, I quickly want to share a free resource we have on the KIPS website and YouTube channel. If you're struggling with your online workouts or just want to see the items that we recommend, check out our virtual training resources page. You'll find breakdowns on streaming setups, reviews on microphones, and other free videos that can help you build your fitness business today. Did I mention they're free? Go check them out at the link in the description or head over to our website to find them under the blog tab. Welcome to the Best of March 2022 episode of the KIPS podcast. My name is Tyler Valencia and I'm the president of KIPS and Time to Train Fitness. With the Best of series, what we try to do is wrap up all the content that we made in the previous month. So we go through the YouTube tutorials, we go through the podcast episodes, and if there's any blog posts that we made, we go through those as well. So we try to pack in as much information as we can into this shorter episode to try to intrigue our listeners, try to get them to want to go watch, listen to any of the other content that we mentioned, and hopefully help them in their career. As we wrapped up the month of March here at KIPS, the content side was a little less than usual. It was two parts, but the big one being that I, myself, Tyler, got a cold and it got a little hard to put out content in terms of my voice. And it was one of those colds that essentially you didn't really sound good, but you felt better. And it really put a damper on the content and the work that we were doing with creating YouTube tutorials and with the podcast. So long story short, it didn't really make for quality sounding audio, and therefore we had to switch it up a little bit. And we'll get to that later on in this episode. On the bright side though, we got closer to the release of some new courses with KIPS. One of those being social media for fitness professionals. If you like the style of the tutorials that we put out on YouTube, you will see the influence in this course. As many Fit Pros have seen over the last few years, marketing their services is important to continued growth, no matter what role you have within the fitness industry. Whether you work in a gym or are an independent instructor, marketing yourself, it builds value. It shows your professionalism and it helps you attract new clients. This course will take you through the building of a fictitious business where we make a logo, create a color scheme, and then we go through each of the social media platforms to show you how to implement these into it with new content. As we wrap up another month, we also like to give a shout out to our top 10 cities of the previous month. So here we go with the top 10 cities of March. Columbus, ABQ, Albuquerque, Sacktown, Sacramento, Chandler, Ottawa, Frankfurt, Dubai, Bend, Williamsburg, and Dallas. There were a couple cities, big cities, right outside the top 10. But thank you for tuning in, listening, being a fan of the podcast. On that same line, if you have a question or a topic you want us to explore on the podcast, send us an email with the subject line podcast to info@kipsonline.org. If it's a topic that you want us to explore, we can definitely try to find a guest in that area, potentially bring back another guest and really dive into that topic to hopefully provide valuable information for you, the listeners, to apply with your fitness careers. One more item before we get to the meat and potatoes of this episode, this best of episode. I want to throw out a reminder for anybody who lives in Seattle or is local to the Pacific Northwest. The weekend of April 28th to May 1st is the Pacific Northwest FitCon. In the description for this episode, you'll find a list of all the lectures, and yours truly will be presenting 2 lectures, both in the personal training realm. On April 29th, I have my Breaking the Core lecture and workout, which takes a look at the latest issues facing core training. And then we go through a variety of core exercises. Hopefully, the exercises in this you'll find effective and get you thinking about how the core is not just crunches. The following evening, I have my new lecture on breaking barriers involved with exercise selection. This lecture came about and it kind of evolved from all those times that you've been training a client or maybe teaching a class and you have that participant or you have that client that says, I don't feel this, or what am I working? We all know there, we've all been there. And with exercises that we're going over and exercises that you've probably been in this situation with, we know they're good and we know that they're good for the client, but there's that barrier that exists where if a client feels like the exercise isn't burning their biceps or burning their abs, then it's not good. So we want to talk about these scenarios, share some ideas, and then we'll go through a hands-on situation of how we can demonstrate new exercises to our clients and apply them. As I mentioned in the opening of this episode, that I had a cold in March and it lasted for probably 2 weeks where I didn't really record much. If you follow me on Instagram or if you by chance heard me on another podcast, you probably heard my voice sounded super nasally and I didn't really want to record for that matter. And that meant that it was time to crank out a blog post, old-fashioned written blog post. And to do that, I went back to one of our most popular blog posts from actually 2017. And it was a blog post about the differences between being a contractor and an employee. So this is an updated version for it. And with it, the goal was to try to provide information for fitness instructors to know that being an independent contractor is not a bad thing. A story that I've shared, I believe, on the KIPS podcast was how years ago, I was looking for a new instructor for my outdoor boot camp. And I was speaking with an instructor about how people are paid with the company. And I mentioned that they're independent contractors and ultimately came back to me that they were going to pass on being an instructor despite wanting to because they weren't quote unquote ready to be a independent contractor. So in my opinion, it's more of we aren't providing with fitness professionals the information to know that it's not a bad thing, that a lot of fitness instructors become independents, they become contractors, and that is a viable way to make a living in this industry, that they just think that I submit my W-2, I'm an employee, and I get a check every 2 weeks or at the end of the month. And they don't know that there's a difference between them and that it is a positive to be a contract, to be a business owner, to be a contractor. So in this blog post, we go over the benefits. We talk about them, how one of them is even being your own boss. As a contractor, you are not an employee. And there are tons of benefits, not just tax benefits, but benefits that a lot of fitness professionals enjoy, that they enjoy building their own business. They enjoy being their own boss. I think that's one of the underlying themes of being a fitness professional is that you get into it because you like the flexibility, you like being your own boss, making your own schedule, and you can fit your schedule around some of the other items in your life. So this blog post dives into those, talks about some of the items to consider, and hopefully gives the fitness professional the ability to make that decision when the time comes. And we're rolling along now into the next thing, which is the YouTube tutorial that we made. And that was one on 3 tips for filming ground-based movements. Now, this one kind of came about from months of issues with filming things such as bird dogs, planks, crunches, things that your head position becomes closer to your lavalier microphone. And in this one, of course, a lot of the things involve if you wear a lavalier microphone, but there are points where I do mention a shotgun microphone. But with this, it really spawned from ruined audio, distorted audio, from having the microphone right against my chest or having the microphone too close to my mouth, and it just makes the audio sound awful. And hopefully this tutorial gives people that are in this position, they can avoid those headaches, that they can hopefully edit things that make their lives easier. So we go over 3 tips and they're all kind of different. Some of them are how you go over cueing. And the one that I'll share involving cueing is being conscious of your head position. Now this is kind of next level because you have to really practice it as well. Let's imagine that I'm wearing a lavalier microphone and I'm doing a ground-based movement, let's say a bird dog. So I'm going to be getting into and demonstrating a bird dog for whether it's a online workout that is pre-recorded or even streaming. Now, being conscious of it means that I know that I'm going to be going into a bad position for audio purposes. So maybe I'm going to point out that I'm going to demo it and not say anything so that I'm not going to distort any audio, go through the movement, then go through all the cues and maybe even point out, now for the sake of this demo, I'm going to be going into a position where I don't want you to have your head position, and then speak through it and making sure that you're not distorting your audio. But that makes you self-conscious of it. It makes people point out that, oh, that is not where my head position should be. It actually should be a little closer, a little more, hopefully more neutral. These are things that helps you improve your audio, but also improve your cueing too, because you're conscious of those things that are differences with online workouts. When you're teaching in front of a class, you're probably not going to care if you just have that distortion or that loud peak. We've all heard it. If you walk by a group exercise room or you're in one of those, or it happens to you where the audio just shoots up super loud, nobody's going to walk out of it. But with online workouts, if it's a new person or if you're trying to improve the experience, you want to be professional, we want to avoid those situations. So those are things that you can expect from this tutorial. It's a really solid one that it's not just talking about cueing. We go over a tip for how you can prepare your microphone. And then lastly, we talk about some options for backup. So check that one out. That one will be in the description. It's called 3 Tips for Filming Ground-Based Movements. With March, we had 2 episodes in the KIPS podcast, 2 solid guests. We had Leslie Bender and Vincent Mezzo. The first guest, Leslie, she is the definition of a fit pro. 2020 IDEA Personal Trainer of the Year, an instructor that has created her own courses. She has done almost every single job within the industry, has her own piece of equipment named after her, the Bender Ball, and for good reason. She's done it for 3 decades. And in my opinion, someone that you want to tune in for, whether she's at a conference, and I'm saying that even though I know that I have a conference session at the same time as her coming up, but someone you want to listen to because she has a well evidence-based opinion on exercise. So in this podcast, we go over a lot of great topics. We talk about education. We talk about core training. We talk about group exercise. We talk about hands-on application for even the interview. Tips that you can apply if you are in the position where you are going to an interview and hopefully landing your new job in the fitness industry. The clip that we're going to tune in for right here is we're talking about core training. Leslie and I both do sessions at conferences on core training, and we share a common view on core training. So we're going to jump into it now. Here is Leslie's opinion on core training and its application.
Well, not to offend anyone, but core training is a joke. Every time your foot hits the ground, you activate your core. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, laying on the ground, lifting and lowering our legs, for example, in a supine position is activating the transverse somewhere in the neighborhood of 10%. And the rest of the activation is pretty much hip flexors. But we see that in every single core training class. Mm-hmm. And I want to pull my hair out because you see people struggling. And again, understanding the relationship of fascia, the minute you lower the legs down, if a trainer was actually watching their students, they would see the neck start to flex. They'd see the sternocleidomastoids start to tighten. And again, I look at exercises and I say to myself, why are you doing it? And this is one of my pet peeves. Oh, well, I saw it on YouTube. No, answer the question. What are you trying to work? Lower abs. Well, guess what? There are no lower abs. And I think that's the fault of our industry, right? Yeah. Our industry, and I think this is a big thing, is our industry does not have set requirements, or we don't have regulation. And, we could go round and round about this because, there is no regulatory system of personal trainers like there is for physical therapists. You have to think about it. You actually have to have a license to be a massage therapist. You mm-hmm. have to be licensed to be an esthetician and on, but yet our industry has never required it, which has always been mind-boggling to me, because if there was a requirement to be licensed, I would be the first in line to go, what do I need to do? How do I learn? How do I take the test? Because I feel like what we are doing is we are putting the lives of people in our hands, and they're depending on us to allow them to make that change, like core training. Why are we putting people on the ground, making them do crunches, when we know that if we just have people reach and turn and bend and move, they're activating their core authentically? So, I feel like, we've misled the consumer in so many ways that it's all about aesthetics. Like, mm-hmm. yeah, you want to get 6-pack abs. Well, guess what? We all have six packs underneath that adipose tissue. Stop drinking beer and eating pizza, and guess what? You're going to look good.
Our next guest from March was Vincent Mezzo. Vincent is the current Senior Fitness Director for Town Sports International. So he oversees all the education of newly onboarded instructors and existing instructors. He's also the Director of Ed for Kettlebell Concepts. That's where I met him for my time with that company. With this episode, I really wanted to talk about what's the experience, what is that like for fit pros that are going back to working at a gym. And that might be a different scenario depending upon where you are in the country. But Vince, him being a senior fitness director and overseeing the fitness managers and the education and the instructors, he has seen this. He's seen what this is like at a high level. So his perspective on this, I think, is great feedback for fit pros as you make that decision or if you're already there. And one of the things that we talked about was how it's been tough for some gyms to attract fit pros to come back. During the last 2 years, fit pros that were teaching online and making more money, what became the benefit for them to go back to a gym? What is that for them? So this was a topic that Vince shares his perspective from the gym side and from the fit pro side, him being an educator, him being an instructor. And the clip that we're going to go into here is talking about the experience and also online workouts, the addition of those, and how gyms approach these moving forward.
I've been banging on about our sports culture as opposed to having a physical culture in this country. And, this goes all the way back to the 50s and then into the 60s with President Kennedy and his great speech. We don't want a nation of spectators, right? We want a nation of people who can do things, who are out there involved in physical activity. Yeah. And unfortunately, we've become a nation of spectators. We're still only penetrating 20% of the population. And the, tonal or mirror, whichever ads they are with LeBron and Serena, who are great, but it's still, here's an athlete. And who does that relate to? That doesn't get the other 80%. That doesn't get all of the 20%. And it doesn't get the 80% to get involved in fitness. So there's a great new book coming out, and you can see some TED Talks and other talks by a woman, a PhD named Michelle Seeger, and it's called The Joy Choice. And basically the idea is that when we tell people to exercise because it's good for their health, it'll reduce their incidence or likelihood of developing diabetes or prediabetes or heart disease, that's not really getting people to exercise.
Yeah.
So getting into this idea of physical culture, exercise can be joyful, and it should be joyful, and it should help improve the quality of your life, not just decrease your risk of disease, but actually improve the quality of your life. And we're still not really seeing that. And also the idea, we've seen this in ACSM's and IRSA's fitness trends, small group classes and the community that happens at a gym is very, very important. So back to your previous question, do gyms need to get into this digital online space? Well, maybe what they need to do is differentiate themselves from this digital online space and saying, we're giving you a community, not just a bunch of videos that you can do on your own.
Now, that's it for this best of episode of the KIPS podcast. A quick one. We didn't really have as much content as we typically put out, but as this episode is being recorded in April, already got that train rolling. 2 episodes of the KIPS podcast have already been recorded at the time of this best of episode, and more coming out. So make sure you check out the episodes and the content that we released in the previous month. Thank you for being a listener, a subscriber to the KIPS podcast. If you have the time, please make sure you leave us a review on your favorite platform for listening for podcasts. That helps us grow this, get our podcast out there to more fit pros, and hopefully provide content that people like and people come back to. But until the next one, thank you for listening.